Hello and welcome to another interview in the series The Changemakers, speaking with women about their experiences of change. My name is Laura Cockett and I'm a transformative coach and I run a business called A Bigger Conversation. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined here today by Kimberley Hare. Kimberley is a writer, a facilitator, a trainer and a coach, and she is someone who has some incredible insights about change and what that experience of change is like for us. So I'm really glad that she's taken time to be with us here today. So Kimberley, thank you so much for joining me. Can I hand over to you, Kimberley, to introduce yourself, say a little bit about what you do and how your life is, what your life is like these days?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm delighted to be here, Laura. Thank you. So yes, also a transformative coach like you. A writer I write a regular blog called The Heart of Thriving. And I also, a couple of years ago, wrote a book of the same name, which is about helping people to discover what it means to truly thrive as a human being. So these days I spend my time facilitating workshops and retreats, coaching people, working with business organizations, especially leaders, and helping people to get over themselves really and have and create a more wonderful life. And my life is well, it's really interesting. I'm going to turn 61 next month in April, and so been around a while. And if you'd have met me before 2009, 2010, I would have said really honestly, and I meant it sincerely, that I had a wonderful life. I had this thriving business, really successful. I was traveling the world. I had, raving fan clients. For a consultancy business, which is what we were at the time, we weren't huge, but I mean, quite big. I had 12 full-time consultants working. And we worked with leading blue chip companies all over the world. I also had, fantastic relationships, godchildren, and, financial security, lovely house. So I thought I'd got it sussed, honestly. I was very smug. I thought I'd got the whole thing cracked. And then I bumped into this understanding, which I call the heart of thriving. It's often called the three principles, or the inside out understanding, or innate health. And I've realized since that I didn't have a clue about what was on offer. So that was very humbling, and I'm very grateful for what I've seen. So yeah, my life now is truly wonderful, whereas before I thought it was, but it was I call it striving rather than thriving. I always worked incredibly hard. I was never anxious, but I was quite stressed a lot of the time. And it felt hard work.
So sort of going back 9 or 10 years, you said life was wonderful. It looked wonderful. So kind of, what is it that you see now that is so much more wonderful compared to what you thought was already the peak 9 or 10 years ago?
I saw what lies behind the human experience, if that doesn't sound too grandiose. I saw that my experience wasn't coming from out there, wasn't coming from the external world, my circumstances or life events. I saw that I lived in that I was living in the feeling of my thinking moment to moment, not the feeling of the world. And I also saw, and this was the thing that made the biggest difference, I saw who I really am and who we all really are underneath all of that. I saw my innate well-being, my resilience, my creativity, my connection to all that is. I saw my own resourcefulness in the face of no matter what. And I saw that all of that was built into the design, and it wasn't something that I had to strive for. And it was really interesting. I remember, like it was yesterday, the meeting where I effectively fired my 12 consultants. And I was very generous with them. You know, they all had a kind of 6-month period where they could go off and find what they wanted to do, and you know, and in fact they've all gone off and done marvelous things, some of them together with each other. But this was like my family, these 12 people. But it just became clear to me that although I could have very easily gone on for another 25 years doing the same thing successfully, I didn't want to. I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to share this understanding that I was speaking about. And I wanted that to be the only thing I did. And I think partly, and this is, I hope this doesn't sound macabre, but because of my kind of stage in life, you know, I don't have an infinite amount of time left. And this isn't a kind of I'm not on a mission to change the world or anything anymore, although I used to be. But it's more about, how do I want to invest my time and energy? And I want to invest that now in things that I think are going to make the most sustainable, transformative difference for people.
Okay.
So I remember this meeting, and you could have, I wish I'd videoed it because everybody was completely gobsmacked. And people said I was bonkers. I remember so many people saying I was bonkers, outside the team and inside the team, for walking away essentially from this hugely successful business. We were turning over, you know, 2 million plus. And as I say, it would have been very easy to carry on doing that. Yeah, so it's really funny looking back, but it felt so right.
That is a brilliant story, Kim, because lots of people will be thinking that does sound like an incredible change, in the true meaning of the word incredible, to walk away from a successful, thriving business like that. So what was it that happened that for you that prompted this journey of change?
It was my understanding, really, Laura, and I guess, and I've heard this from so many clients since, who've seen some powerful, profound insights and realizations. It just didn't make sense anymore to share, you know, because the business in those days, it was very what I call outside in. It was all about strategies and techniques and how-tos, and you know, I had a reputation for being like a Swiss Army knife. It didn't matter what you came to me with. I had some gizmo or technique or 7-step thing that you could do. I was also a master practitioner and a master trainer in NLP. So I had all of that stuff, that toolbox, if you like. And there just came a day where I kind of just didn't make sense anymore, because I'd seen something even better. And I can remember the day I was running a call. I was facilitating a leadership program, and I'd set the group off working on something and given them this technique to explore and practice. And I was halfway through briefing them to do that, and I felt myself just kind of, you know, it's like straw coming out of my mouth. And I just thought, well, I don't want to do this anymore. And I just kind of gave them something to talk to each other about whilst I kind of got my bearings. But that was the kind of, I sort of remember drawing a line in the sand for myself after.
And so, having spent years building this thriving business, and then, as you say, this day when you let your team go, was that process, even though you said earlier that it felt right, was that process difficult in some way? Was it painful? Can you tell us a bit about how you experienced it?
No, it wasn't difficult, it wasn't painful. It felt very natural. It felt uncertain, but not in a scary way. And it felt kind of almost inevitable, actually. And I've never had a moment's regret, not a moment. And yeah, my biggest concern was actually how they would do, these 12 people. But as I say, they've gone on and they're flying, all of them. But the concern wasn't about me and what would happen, and I just knew it was right, and I just knew I'd be okay, because by then I'd kind of seen some initial stuff about you know, who we really are, and I knew that my identity and my well-being wasn't dependent on that business. It always had been before, you see. It always had been. It was kind of like my yardstick for how well I was doing in life.
So you kind of measured your success in life against the success of your business.
Yeah.
And Kim, you've said a couple of times there, you've sort of referred to who we really are. Can you say a bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. I can say loads about that.
Go on then.
Well, I've seen that we are not this, we are not the kind of little self that we think we are. So we're not our experiences, we're not our thoughts, we're not our beliefs, we're not our feelings, we're not our personalities, we're not our histories. We're not the stories that we've made up about who we are. We're something so much more deeper and more wonderful and more connected, and you know, we are the infinite creative potential of the universe walking around in a human body. And once I really saw that to be true, I can't take any of the other stuff seriously anymore.
Yeah, well, when you put it like that, yeah. So when you say you can't take the other stuff seriously, what is that other stuff that you see that we can let go?
Well, all of the insecurity, all of the insecure thinking, all of the what if, you know, yeah, but supposing this new business, which is now just me rather than these 12 people, supposing that doesn't work, supposing we don't have any clients, supposing you know, I didn't have a mortgage by then, but you know, supposing I can't pay the mortgage, suppose I end up in a cardboard box underneath St Pancras Station, you know, all of that. It was like I just saw that for what it was, which is insecure thinking. And so, as I often say, like, uncertainty is inevitable, but insecurity is optional, I found.
I'm putting my hand up there, Kim, because I just want to check that you're okay for me to ask you something in relation to one of the next questions. Because one of the things that comes up, as you and I both know, when people start talking about change, is they come up with lots of real world reasons why they can't. Exactly like you just said, like, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got kids' school uniforms to pay for, so I can't. So, you know, that whole, it's all very well for you, Kim, because you had some money, or it's all very well for you, Laura, when you walked out of your job because you don't have kids to pay for. So are you happy for me to sort of put some of that into the question? That,
yeah, you know, sure, anything.
Brilliant. So the next question then will be, what have you seen about change? And then it will be the question about, you know, there will be people out there who will be saying, it sounds great, Kim, but, you know, etc. Okay. So Kim, what have you seen about change now?
Well, I wanted to, I hope this is useful for people. I wanted to split it into two kinds of change. Change on the outside and change on the inside. Right. So on the outside would be, you know, change to our circumstances, our job, how, you know, the bank balance, the relationships we're in, all of that stuff. And the game changer for me was knowing that none of that can impact on my well-being or anybody's well-being and that we have this innate resilience and creativity. So when we know that, we navigate the inevitable ups and downs, as it looks, in our circumstances, in life's, life events, with a kind of much more well-being and grace and lightness and humour. Life got a lot funnier.
It does.
And if there is really a problem to be solved out there, what I've found is that I became a better problem solver. But I also started to see through more and more of the issues or problems that I'd created that were merely thought generated. They weren't actually real problems. We see through the ones that you don't need to do anything about them. Some things you do, but most things you don't. But we create a story about them. And so we can drop the story. We can create a new story that serves us better, serves others better. So it's not necessarily that reality changes, but our relationship with reality transforms. So that's the first thing I'd say about the change on the outside. Does that make sense? That makes
brilliant sense.
And then the second thing is change on the inside. And for me, this is the really transformative part of this whole conversation. And I guess I'm talking about what other traditions might have called our level of consciousness. And I think it's actually the only way we can sustainably change the world out there, ironically, is through a shift in our own level of consciousness. And for me, I love the word thriving. For me, that's where thriving really sits, all of it. It sits there on this, Timothy Galway called it the inner game. It's all about the inner game. And we see that our lives are not just subjective, which was very much the kind of view in, NLP circles, that it's not about, okay, I see that, it's not about what happens to me, it's what I do with what happens to me. It's far beyond that. We see that our lives are our experience of our life is completely constructed moment to moment, given the thinking that looks real to us. So what that tends to do in practical terms is, for me anyway, I've noticed, it's made me take more risks, be bolder, more courageous, treat the whole of life much more like a game or an adventure. It's just more fun, more exciting. And I have taken myself, what I call my little self, my ego, I guess. I've taken that out of it most of the time. So, because that's not who we are anyway. And it's, I kind of think of it more like a toddler who just it's like it needs to be loved, and I'm fine loving it, but it's not who I am. And we see that we truly are connected. That's the other thing, the other game changer. We see that we can plug into, in fact, we are plugged into all the time, whether we see it or not. We're plugged into that intelligence behind life. It's like a superpower, actually. It's like a superpower.
I would agree with you there. It does feel like that a lot of the time. You do feel there is a sense of invincibility to it as well, isn't there? Yeah, Kim, that was beautifully put. I love the way you sort of talked about the change on the outside and the change on the inside. And of course, one of the reasons, as you know, that I'm talking to women about change is because I want to slightly challenge some of those ideas that are so prevalent in our society, that change is always difficult, change is painful, change might be possible, but it'll be a struggle. And so
sorry to interrupt, they're thinking, aren't they, of the external? They're thinking of the out there change.
Yes, and I think they're thinking of the out there change, and I think also, but out there change which for the time being, looks like what is what causes
True.
the inside change.
Yeah.
So what I'm wondering is that there might be women watching this who are thinking, well, that all sounds lovely, Kim. You made this big change, but basically you changed from having this kind of thriving £2 million turnover business to just deciding not to really do that anymore. What about me? I have a, what about me, who has a mortgage to pay or has two kids to think about? I can't do that. That's not possible for me. What would you say to women who are watching who feel like that like this kind of change isn't something that they can have?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, when our thinking looks true, it looks true, doesn't it? I mean, by definition, it's never thinking that's the problem. It's thinking that doesn't look like thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
It's thinking that looks like reality.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking that looks like truth. So yeah, I get that, and I get that question. Easy for you, buddy. That kind of thing. But and people don't have to make the kind of changes that I've made. There's no kind of. I wouldn't presume to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do, but it's so fascinating to me and so powerful the way, if people start to look at the stories that they've been creating and just start to kind of gently challenge them, it's amazing to me what becomes possible. I mean, let's take the money thing, because it's such a common worry for people. That my favorite, one of my favorite clients came to me, I remember, and this was genuine, this was authentic, they weren't bullshitting. they came because they wanted to work on their financial insecurity, because they only had 15 million, I think it was, in the bank. And genuinely, their story was, to feel financially secure, you had to have at least, 30 or something. It's like, and for most of us, that would be what?
Yeah. I am sitting here now hearing that for the first time, and that's my reaction.
Yeah, but he was genuinely anxious, right? It's got nothing to do with the numbers. Nothing. And and then I'd point to, over Christmas, I can't remember if we've chatted about it, but Ross and I went to India, and we went to visit the slums in India, in Mumbai, and had the most inspiring, fascinating time there, with people who've got nothing in terms of external resources, money. And it sounds almost a cliche to say it, but the overwhelming sense I had of that day was their joy, their resilience, their connection, the level of community in that place, in that slum. They don't even allow it to be called a slum. They hate it when you say that. They call it a neighborhood. The community in that place, I mean, it puts us to shame over here. Absolutely puts us to shame. So I would just kind of encourage people to think about what are the stories that they're creating about money, for example, or anything else, that are keeping them feeling disempowered, unresourceful, angry, scared, whatever it is. Because, like, the one thing we can be sure of with thought is, the one thing we can be sure of with those kind of unhelpful, limiting feelings is they're based on thought. Like they can't come from anywhere else.
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
I think that answers my question beautifully. Yes, thank you. Kim, thank you so much for sharing your experience of change and your insights about change with us today. I really appreciate that. And I'm sure that people watching will have found that really useful. If there are people watching who would like to find out more about what you do, or find out how they can work with you, or maybe read your blogs, etc., how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, I found it really fun. Thanks, Laura. So the website is www.heartofthriving, all one word, .com. And my email is the same. So it's kim@heartofthriving.com. And people can subscribe to my blog. They can join me for free regular Zoom calls, or they can really immerse themselves and come on one of my workshops or retreats.
Which I can heartily recommend. That is how the first time I met Kim was 2 years ago on one of those 3-day retreats, which is fantastic. It's sort of life-changing. That doesn't, yeah, that might sound a bit grandiose as well, but actually it's true. So yeah, thank you so much, Kim.
You're welcome.
And just sort of in conclusion, thank you to everybody who is watching. I know some people are following this series. I really appreciate you coming back and checking out the new videos each week. If you want to know a little bit more about me, you can find out at www.abiggerconversation.com, and you can get in touch with me, laura@abiggerconversation.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back here again soon with another in the series of The Changemakers. Thank you. Bye-bye.